People often expect wisdom to arrive wrapped in complexity, dressed in clever language, or delivered from a stage with dramatic lighting. But sometimes it arrives quietly, in the steady voice of someone who has lived long enough to know what actually matters. When Elon Musk's mother speaks, people listen not because she is chasing attention, but because she has carried responsibility, uncertainty, and hope for decades and emerged with clarity instead of bitterness. What makes her words linger is not celebrity proximity, but perspective. She has seen success grow from obscurity. She has witnessed failure without letting it define her children or herself. She has endured judgment, single motherhood, financial strain, and public misunderstanding, yet she never built her identity around victimhood. Instead, she built resilience so quietly that many only noticed it after the world noticed her son. There is something unforgettable about hearing someone who has already walked through the storm tell you that fear is not a signal to stop, but a sign that growth is nearby. She doesn't romanticize hardship, but she refuses to treat it as a curse. In her view, difficulty is not evidence that you chose the wrong path. Often, it is proof that you chose a meaningful one. She has spoken repeatedly about the power of continuing when no one is applauding. Long before Elon Musk became a name the world recognized. There were years when ambition looked like irresponsibility to outsiders. Dreams looked like delusions. Persistence looked like stubbornness. Yet she understood something many people never do, that unconventional paths rarely receive early approval. Her message cuts deep because it confronts a quiet fear many people carry. The fear of starting late. The fear of being behind. The fear that if success hasn't arrived by a certain age, it never will. She challenges that fear not with slogans, but with lived proof. Reinvention does not have an expiration date. Growth is not reserved for the young. Courage does not diminish with time unless you allow it to. She has talked about beginning new chapters when others assumed her story was already written. About stepping into new industries, new roles, new versions of herself while ignoring the invisible clock society loves to hang over women, parents, and anyone who doesn't follow a neat timeline. Her life quietly argues that timing is personal, not universal. What makes her words unforgettable is their calm defiance of excuses. Not excuses born of laziness, but the socially acceptable ones that sound reasonable and safe. She dismantles them gently. You are not too old. You are not too inexperienced. You are not disqualified because you started small. You are not wrong for wanting more. She often reminds people that confidence is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It is built privately through small decisions to keep going when quitting would be easier and socially understandable. Confidence grows when you survive moments you once believed would break you. There is a particular strength in how she speaks about motherhood. Not as a pedestal or a limitation, but as a responsibility that demanded resourcefulness. She didn't wait for perfect conditions to raise ambitious children. She taught them by example that responsibility and aspiration are not opposites. That you can care deeply and still expect greatness. That love does not require shrinking dreams. She has said, in essence, that children learn far more from what you tolerate than what you preach. They absorb how you respond to stress, how you handle setbacks, how you speak about yourself when things don't work out. Her influence wasn't built through motivational speeches at the dinner table, but through consistency. What stays with people is her refusal to rewrite the past as if it were easy. She doesn't pretend that struggle was glamorous or empowering in the moment. She acknowledges fear, exhaustion, and doubt. But she never frames them as reasons to stop believing in a better future. There is an honesty in admitting that you don't always know how things will work out, but you move forward anyway. That certainty is not a prerequisite for action. Faith often follows movement, not the other way around. Her message resonates deeply in a world obsessed with instant results. She represents patience without passivity. She shows that you can be realistic without being cynical. That you can accept responsibility for your life without blaming yourself for circumstances you did not choose. She speaks about self-respect in a way that feels grounding rather than performative. Self-respect, to her, is not about demanding admiration. It's about refusing to abandon yourself. About making decisions you can stand behind even when no one else understands them. What many people won't forget is how she normalizes uncertainty. She doesn't present a life free of fear, but a life where fear is not in charge. She demonstrates that bravery is not the absence of anxiety, but the ability to move with it instead of waiting for it to disappear. Her words land because they strip away the illusion that success requires perfection. She reminds people that most achievements are built by imperfect individuals who simply kept showing up. That mistakes are not evidence of inadequacy, but tuition fees for learning. There is also something deeply reassuring in her reminder that your worth is not measured by public recognition. For years, she lived a meaningful life that was invisible to the world. And it mattered. Quiet effort mattered. Survival mattered. Growth mattered. She challenges the belief that you must be extraordinary to begin. Instead, she suggests that extraordinary outcomes often grow from ordinary persistence. From doing what needs to be done again and again. Even when it feels unremarkable, one of the most powerful undercurrents in her message is responsibility without harshness. She believes in accountability, but not in self-punishment. She encourages learning from mistakes without letting them define your identity. She also speaks openly about financial independence, not as a status symbol, but as freedom. Freedom to make choices without fear. Freedom to leave situations that diminish you. Freedom to support others without losing yourself. Her perspective reframes money not as greed, but as security and agency. People don't forget her words because they feel earned. They come from someone who did not outsource resilience to motivational quotes, but built it through experience. Someone who understands that strength is not always visible while it is being developed. Her story quietly reminds people that comparison is a thief of peace. That measuring your progress against someone else's timeline only distracts you from your own path. That your journey does not need to look impressive to be valid. She has a way of speaking about failure that removes its sting. Failure, in her view, is information. It tells you what doesn't work, not who you are. It becomes dangerous only when you interpret it as a verdict instead of feedback. Her influence also lies in how she honors effort. Not just success, but effort. Showing up counts. Trying counts. Beginning again counts. This perspective is especially powerful for those who feel invisible in their struggle. She reminds people that life does not hand out guarantees. But it does offer opportunities to respond. And how you respond shapes your character long before it shapes your circumstances. There is a subtle but firm encouragement in her message to stop waiting for permission. Permission to start. Permission to change. Permission to want more. She suggests that most people who achieve meaningful change simply decide to begin without consensus. What makes her words unforgettable is that they don't pressure you to become someone else. They invite you to become more fully yourself. To use what you have. To build from where you are. To trust that progress is possible even if the path is unclear. She does not promise ease. She promises growth if you are willing to endure discomfort without losing hope. She does not sell certainty. She offers resilience. In a culture that celebrates overnight success stories, her voice is a reminder that most meaningful lives are built quietly, patiently, and imperfectly. That strength often looks like persistence in ordinary days. She has lived long enough to know that regret rarely comes from trying and failing. It comes from never trying at all. From silencing your own ambition because it felt inconvenient or unrealistic. Her message stays because it speaks to something universal. The desire to believe that effort matters. That change is possible. That your current circumstances are not the final chapter. When people hear what Elon Musk's mom has said, they don't just hear advice. They hear permission. Permission to keep going. Permission to start late. Permission to trust themselves, and that is why her words are so difficult to forget. They don't shout. They don't impress. They settle quietly into the mind and wait for the moment you need them most. They return when you are tired. When you feel behind. When you wonder if continuing is worth it. And in that moment, her message feels less like inspiration and more like a steady hand reminding you that you are capable of more than you think. Not because success is guaranteed, but because resilience can be learned. And once learned, it changes everything. That is the power of a life lived with courage and honesty. It leaves behind words that don't fade. Words that stay with you long after the noise has passed, quietly urging you forward, one step at a time. There is another layer to her message that sinks in slowly, often long after you first hear it. It is the understanding that strength does not require hardness. That you can be gentle and still unbreakable. She does not confuse resilience with emotional numbness. She allows space for fear, sadness, and uncertainty, but she refuses to let them make decisions for her. She speaks about dignity in everyday choices. About how you carry yourself when life feels unfair. About refusing to let bitterness become your personality. About choosing grace even when no one would blame you for being angry. This quiet dignity becomes a form of power, one that doesn't demand attention but commands respect. Her words remind people that success is rarely a straight line. It bends, pauses, reverses, and sometimes collapses entirely before rebuilding. What matters is not how clean the journey looks, but whether you stay engaged with it. Whether you keep learning instead of retreating. She has seen how quickly public opinion changes. How praise can turn to criticism overnight. That is why she emphasizes building an inner foundation rather than chasing external validation. Applause is unreliable. Character is not. One of the most grounding truths in her message is that you don't need to feel ready to begin. Readiness often comes after action, not before. Waiting to feel confident can quietly turn into a lifetime of waiting. She encourages movement, even if it's imperfect and awkward. She also challenges the belief that suffering automatically makes you stronger. It doesn't. Reflection does. Choice does. Responsibility does. Hardship only becomes meaningful when you decide to learn from it instead of letting it harden you. Her life illustrates that reinvention is not betrayal of who you were. It is respect for who you are becoming. Letting go of outdated identities is not weakness, it is growth. She speaks with particular clarity about self-trust. About listening to your inner voice even when it whispers instead of shouts. Especially when the world is loud with opinions that have nothing to do with your reality. What many people feel when they hear her speak is relief. Relief that they don't have to rush. Relief that mistakes don't disqualify them. Relief that their quiet efforts still count. She understands that progress is often invisible while it's happening. That seeds grow underground before they break the surface. And quitting too early is the most common way people sabotage their own future. Her message also carries a warning, though it is delivered gently. Do not underestimate the cost of giving up on yourself. The cost is not just lost opportunity, but lost self-respect. And that loss is far heavier than failure. She encourages people to build lives they can live with, not just lives that look impressive. To define success in ways that align with their values rather than borrowed expectations. There is wisdom in how she speaks about balance. Not as a perfect equilibrium, but as a constant adjustment. Some seasons demand endurance. Others demand rest. Knowing the difference is part of maturity, she reminds people that asking for help is not a sign of incompetence. It is a recognition of reality. No meaningful life is built alone, no matter how strong the individual, her words stay because they don't promise transformation overnight. They promise something far more realistic and far more powerful, gradual change through consistent effort. She invites people to stop waiting for the moment when everything makes sense. Life rarely offers that moment. It offers choices instead, and perhaps the most unforgettable part of her message is this quiet assurance: you are allowed to hope. Even after disappointment. Even after failure. Even after starting over more times than you can count, hope, in her world, is not naive optimism. It is disciplined belief. The belief that effort matters. That learning accumulates. That character compounds over time. Her life stands as evidence that you don't need to rush to the finish line. You need to stay on the path, and as long as you are still walking, still trying, still learning, your story is not over. That truth, once heard, has a way of staying with you. Quietly. Persistently. Waiting for the moment you need it most. There is a quiet courage in how she talks about endurance. Not the kind that looks heroic from the outside, but the kind that simply refuses to quit on ordinary days. The days when nothing exciting happens. The days when progress feels invisible. She understands that most lives are shaped not by dramatic moments, but by how people handle these unremarkable stretches of time. She speaks about patience as an active skill, not passive waiting. Patience is choosing to stay committed even when results lag behind effort. It is trusting that consistency will eventually reveal its value. Her words challenge the modern addiction to speed, to instant validation, to quick wins. She reminds people that depth cannot be rushed, that mastery takes time, that character is built slowly, often quietly. Through repetition, she has witnessed how easily people abandon long-term growth for short-term comfort. And she gently warns against confusing ease with alignment. The easiest path is not always the right one. There is also a deep sense of realism in her message. She does not promise that hard work guarantees success. She promises that hard work builds capacity. And capacity increases your chances. That distinction matters. She encourages people to focus less on outcomes they cannot control and more on effort they can. On showing up prepared. On doing their part fully. On letting go of the illusion that control equals safety. Her life reflects an understanding that self-belief is not arrogance. It is responsibility. If you do not believe in your ability to grow, you outsource your future to chance. She speaks openly about rejection. About being overlooked. About not being chosen. She reframes rejection as redirection rather than judgment. Not every closed door is a verdict. Some are protection. Her message resonates with those who have been underestimated. Those who have been told, subtly or directly, to lower their expectations. She reminds them that other people's limits do not define their potential. she understands the quiet pain of carrying dreams that no one else can see yet. And she validates that pain without encouraging resentment. Dreams do not require unanimous support to be valid. One of the most powerful ideas she shares is that discipline often precedes motivation. Waiting to feel inspired can keep you stuck. Action creates momentum. Momentum creates belief. She also speaks about the importance of finishing what you start, even imperfectly. Completion builds confidence. Abandonment builds doubt. Done is often more powerful than perfect. Her perspective on failure continues to disarm fear. Failure is not the opposite of success. Inaction is. Failure still moves you forward by teaching you what to adjust. She reminds people that life will test you repeatedly. Not to punish you, but to reveal what you are made of. Each test is an invitation to respond with intention rather than impulse. There is an undercurrent of self-compassion in her message. She does not advocate relentless self-criticism. She believes growth happens faster when kindness and accountability coexist. She encourages people to speak to themselves with the same respect they would offer someone they care about. Harsh inner dialogue weakens resilience. Honest, supportive self-talk strengthens it. Her words also highlight the importance of adaptability. Rigid plans break under pressure. Flexible principles endure. Knowing when to pivot is not quitting, it is wisdom. She understands that life will sometimes demand reinvention not by choice, but by necessity. And she frames this not as failure, but as evolution. Her message stays because it removes shame from starting again. Starting over is not a step backward. It is a refusal to settle for stagnation. She reminds people that growth is not linear. Progress can look like confusion before clarity. Like discomfort before confidence. Like uncertainty before direction. What makes her voice unforgettable is that it never speaks down to people. It speaks with them. It acknowledges struggle without glorifying it. She invites people to measure their lives not by how little they fail, but by how often they get back up, and in doing so, she leaves people with a quiet but powerful realization. Persistence is not loud, but it is unstoppable, as long as you keep choosing to continue. Even slowly, even imperfectly, you are still moving forward, and that truth, once internalized, becomes a source of strength no circumstance can easily take away.